I think this actually may be the biggest psyop of the modern day. Scientific progress does not exist, and science has never and will never give us some kind of objective truth claim. The reason for this is because to assume that we're progressing in science, to like we're climbing some kind of progression ladder and we're learning more about the universe, you have to take the assumption that there is already some kind of objective ladder and truth to be discovered. And we don't know if that's the case. This is also why we should actually only ever study things individually, but also as a society, that are immediately useful or beneficial to us. And I'll explain more about that specifically a bit later. But first, let me explain that premise because you might not understand yet. It's kind of related to a famous philosophical debate that you probably have heard of, you know, the kind of is mathematics discovered or invented. Now, this doesn't actually have anything to do with mathematics. It's framed through the lens of mathematics, usually for the purpose of that specific philosophical debate, but actually, this is a question of, does objective truth exist, or are we as humans so good at structuring and modeling things that we can see a system and develop some kind of framework for that system, and that framework be so good that we can apply it to other related systems? That sounds a bit abstract, so let me explain what I mean really concretely. Basically, we're asking for any like a law of nature we develop. Let's say for in physics, right, we call them laws of nature. So like force equals mass times acceleration. Is that a real thing that actually exists? Like, is there a thing in the universe called force, or is force just a creation of the human mind that happens to be very useful in modeling different things? So if I'm pushing a car on a road, perhaps this idea, this notion of force is really useful for me to predict how fast this car will accelerate, for example. And the debate is essentially, does that force actually like exist in an objective sense, or is it just our human framework to try and make sense of the universe around us? And the thing is, to think that scientific progression exists, you need to take a position in this philosophical debate, right? Because what you need to do is say the force literally exists in an objective sense. Like there is this mysterious, invisible thing that's like pushing the car, literally. And what's happening is that we're just discovering that thing. We're not describing a system, but we're literally uncovering truth. And once you have that position, then what you can do, it makes rational sense at that point to say, okay, then we've progressed because there's some body of knowledge. There's like some truth of the universe that exists somewhere. And what we're doing is we're forever chipping away at it and we're uncovering more and more things. In that scenario, yeah, you could say scientific progression exists and then we are continuously progressing. But another thing you should be aware of is that progression and advancement is actually also a really arbitrary and subjective claim. Like, for example, there are things that are like clear progressions. Okay, so if in the 1940s they started developing like different computational models during World War II, for example. And then today we literally use those like same foundational principles to develop in the technology that goes into smartphones, for example. In that scenario, you could literally say, okay, across this like 80-year span, there was this, and then we developed this, and now we have this thing, and it's like a direct consequence. That's fine. But if you zoom out in a more historical picture, things get like much fuzzier because things are happening continuously all over the planet. Like the human species is not and never has been a monolith. For example, something may be developed here and then not developed there, and then it kind of gets forgotten in this part of the world, and then it gets developed in this part of the world, and then they come into contact with each other. You know, we can develop the pyramids thousands of years ago, but we can still have people living in like a mud hut today in the 21st century. So there is no monolith, there is no big picture, and there is no truth that we are striving towards, and there never actually has been. A more useful way to look at history and therefore science is actually through human incentives. This is the only connecting thread between anything that we've ever actually done as a species. Okay, there's two things you can do. Obviously, you can look back at history and have this kind of mystical and fantasy idea about we're like some monolithic species and we've been like developing forever, and we're like learning new things every day and building off of each other, which is just untrue. Or you can look at Or you can look at things more objectively and say, these people at this time wanted to achieve this thing, these people at this time wanted to achieve this thing, etc., etc., etc. So who's to say whether the pyramids were built, which were built thousands of years ago, are less advanced or more advanced than modern architecture we have today? Who's to say that modern clothing, the internet, etc., etc., plastics, for example, but like we assume it's a linear progression, but really it's expansive on the same level. There are things that progress like literally from each other, like I gave with the computation example. So in the 1940s, we started building computers for a specific purpose. For the next 100 years, we were developing that specific technology, but that doesn't mean that that technology is like somehow higher on the ladder than this other technology. The point is that the actual only constant is that humans ever only do something when there is some direct benefit to them, which is why I said that we should only actually study things societally and on an individual level that are immediately useful to us, because that's actually all we've ever done anyway, and to do anything else would simply put you at a disadvantage and actually lead to less progress anyway. Look, we as people inherently question like big concepts, big ideas. It's probably what sets us apart and actually makes us human, to be honest. But the dangerous thing that can come from this is that things like the education system, in the modern day anyway, essentially take that desire, that want to question things, and they turn it into some kind of fool's errand pursuit of an objective truth that may or may not actually exist, especially when we analyze it through the lens of science. For example, a modern physics degree is essentially just, here is the last 300 years of knowledge of this specific thing that talks in a grand scale, but actually is just like the last 300 years of human history, which is interesting, by the way. How can we have been around for thousands of years as species, but we've only ever discovered things in the last 300 years? That doesn't make any sense. And the reason that it actually looks this way is because that's the basis, that's the foundation by which we're measuring, is this a legitimate source of knowledge? If it doesn't look like this thing that we developed in the last 300 years, then it's not legitimate knowledge. So of course we've only ever developed things in the last 300 years. Anyway, the point is that you don't need to do this. Like if we stop talking about this in the philosophical abstract sense and we start talking about you and me as individuals, what we actually have agency to do, once you let go of the objectivity and progressive idea of science, you stop trying to force the narrative that we're on this upward trajectory and we're forever uncovering new things, and you instead start to ask incentive questions. You instead start to ask, what thing do I want to actually achieve or learn or discover, and how do I do that, and how much or what do I need to learn to do that? Whether that be learning how the mind works, so you dip into neurobiology or psychology, etc., or whether that be learning more about economic systems because you want to learn business or something like that. The point is that you can't actually achieve anything by not having an objective to begin with, and the objective cannot come from some grand universal scale. It needs to come from inherently selfish desires and things that you want at any certain point, because that's the only place it can come from. And that's actually the only thing that humans have ever done. And if we look back through history, well, we've discovered a hell of a lot of things about a hell of a lot of things by simply just going into the rabbit hole of wanting to achieve a specific task, and then by circumstance discovering a lot of things about a system from that. You know, grand architectural structures were built because some emperor wanted to assert his dominance. You know, gunpowder and cannons were developed because we were trying to conquer each other or destroy each other. I'm not saying that these things are good. I'm just saying that this has always been and will always be why things actually develop. And you can draw lessons from that to an individual level and use that, instead of clinging onto some idea that may give you comfort but really gives you nothing material. And the first and highest leverage step we can take towards this is to improve the engine by which all of this stuff runs. So that is your brain. If you want to learn more about the way the brain works, cognition, and ways of thinking that I've extracted from things like formal mathematics, as well as learning how to apply structured scientific testing into your daily life, first link in the description is a course and community that I have dedicated to specifically that. New modules in there every week. Like the video if you liked the video. It's time to take action. Subscribe to the channel. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month. Thank you all for watching and have a nice day.